Mother's gingerbread. I learned to cook when I was very young. As soon as I could read, I read the cookbook. My mother only had one. I pestered her until she taught me how to follow recipe directions. Mother happily told everybody. When she was 8 years old, she made her own birthday cake. The birthday cake was very simple. A 1-layer, 8-inch yellow cake with chocolate fudge icing. But in those pre-mix, pre-microwave days, that simple cake involved many processes that we rarely encounter now. First, one had to determine if there was enough stove wood chopped. I never learned to use the axe. Daddy usually chopped enough stove wood to cook 2 meals a day. We ate leftovers for supper so we wouldn't heat the stove 3 times a day. One then had to pick a basket of chips for kindling, lay them on top of crumpled paper or corn cobs in the firebox of a huge black cast iron stove that dominated the kitchen. I was 8 years old before I was brave enough to light a match. If the fire burned, we had to remember to put a stick of stove wood in at judicious intervals in order to keep the oven at the right temperature. This was determined by sticking one's hand in the oven and judging if it were too hot or cool to bake whatever one was baking. Biscuits and cornbread required a hot oven. Cakes had to have a cooler temperature. One also had to determine if all the ingredients were available. Running to the store was out of the question for 2 reasons. The store was 8 miles away, and in the mid-30s we had no money and no automobile. Confectioner's sugar for icing I had never heard of. Eggs, milk, butter, and flour were no problem most of the time, unless the cow was dry just before calving. We only baked with sugar on special occasions, but sorghum was available, as was ginger and cinnamon. I found a recipe in the cookbook for Mother's gingerbread that I could usually find ingredients for. I still have that cookbook, and the page the recipe is on is grimy from too much consultation with butter or molasses-coated fingers. I learned how to cream butter and sugar, no mean feat, as all I had to cream it with was a fork. The gingerbread didn't require that step. I mixed the butter with the molasses. I added buttermilk mixed with soda, flour which had to be sifted twice, and ginger and cinnamon. This was all stirred with a tablespoon, of course. No wire whisks or electric mixers in our kitchen. I greased Mother's black iron muffin pans, which she had inherited from her mother, with lard, spooned them 3/4 full with the batter, and baked them. I always took a sample of any of my culinary masterpieces to our closest neighbors up the road, Viola Sims and her great-uncle, Uncle Ben Brooks. Viola was a short, fat black woman who had twisted both her knees running from a snake she encountered in a blackberry patch, causing her to have to walk with 2 sticks. She mostly sat around all day. Uncle Ben was an ancient ex-slave who could remember being freed during the Civil War. Viola and Uncle Ben could be counted on to eat anything I brought them and brag about it. They weren't as dubious as my Uncle Homer was before he bit into his first muffin. "June, are you sure you washed your hands?" Uncle Ben and Viola weren't a bit picky about what they ate. In that, they were akin to the people in our teacher's lounge. We can bring in any leftovers, cakes that tear up, candy that has to be eaten with a spoon, and it disappears in the course of a day, sometimes with compliments, never complaints. I learned early that the way to most people's heart is through their stomachs, and one way to make people happy is to feed them good food. I don't know whether the gingerbread muffins were as good as everybody told me, or whether I've lost my knack. The last time I baked them, I was not impressed. Maybe I've cooked too many elaborate dishes in the intervening years. Maybe it was the electric stove at a constant temperature, the electric mixer I mixed them with, or perhaps it was the bought eggs, butter, milk, and sorghum. The gingerbread muffins were a welcome dessert in sugar-rationed World War II and a 4-H demonstration during the same period, but mostly it gave me the confidence in my being able to cook anything I had a recipe for. I got a lot of mileage out of Mother's gingerbread.